I've booked more than 30,000 appointments since starting my first agency, and in this video I'm going to walk you through the entire step-by-step process on how you can do the same. Now, over the last 6 years I've built multiple agencies to multiple seven figures, and I've made every single mistake. Okay, I've bought all the courses, I watched all the YouTube tutorials, I've bought the 997 courses, the high ticket courses, I've joined the free communities, and nothing worked for me until I discovered the framework that I'm going to share with you in this video. In this video I'm going to walk you through an entire step-by-step guide on how to find the clients, how to convert the clients, how to build a reliable, consistent appointment booking machine for your agency, and how to optimize it so you can basically print money and sit back and get appointments. Let's get started. So what you can see on the screen here is my Calendly analytics. And you can see here that in the last 30 days, I've scheduled or created 1,400 discovery calls, sales calls, appointments, meetings, whatever you want to call them. We completed about 1,000 of them. And as a result of this month, we got around 7 figures in revenue, okay? Just wanted to demonstrate that I actually know what I'm talking about. You can see it on the screen here, okay? And this is basically the framework and paradigm and method of thinking that I have used to book near enough, I don't know, 40 to 50,000 appointments probably since the start of my first business. So it works really well. Let's get into the video. So what actually is a system? We're trying to build a system to build reliability, predictability, consistency. Okay, so we need to actually understand what a system looks like, and funnily enough for you, I have a diagram, okay? So we have inputs, we have processes, we have outputs, and we have feedback, and then we have an environment. So the inputs, this is how a system works. You have the raw material that is input into the system, okay? Then we have the processes, which is the conversion mechanism that converts the inputs into outputs. We then have the outputs, which is obviously the end product that comes about as a result of raw material actually being processed. Then we have feedback, which is information about the system or the effectiveness of the system, and it's basically a byproduct of the processes. And then we have the environment, which is the external conditions by which the system operates in. So this is the first principles of systems theory, or systems thinking, I should say. They're two very different things. And so you need to know what a system is. This is what it looks like. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but let's actually see what this looks like from a client acquisition standpoint, okay? So when you're looking to build predictability with your client acquisition systems, you need to bear this in mind, okay? So we start with leads. Then we have something called conversion tools. Then we have something called clients, which is, I'm sure you're familiar with that. Then we have metrics and the market, okay? So the input in this instance for the client acquisition is a lead, okay? This is sourced by a software, a lead sourcer. It could be manual, it could be a Chrome extension. But if we want the end result to be clients, we have to start with leads, okay? And by lead, I'm talking about the name, email, phone number, social profile, whatever it might be, some method of contacting an individual within your niche. That is the input of the system, is a piece of data, okay? So the great thing about the online business model is we can literally turn emails and phone numbers into cold hard cash. And the only reason we can do that is because of this method of thinking, okay, which is going from leads through conversion tools to clients, okay? So the processes in this instance are something that we call conversion tools. You won't have heard of these names before, like conversion tools. You're like, what the hell is that? Because, well, I kind of had to create this myself because no one's teaching it. But basically a conversion tool is like a copy, a script, a loom, a template, a follow-up message, anything that you use. It's a stimulus essentially. And what you're doing with client acquisition is you're flashing a stimulus in front of a person in your market, hoping it elicits or indicating that it elicits a specific response from that person, okay? So that's all it is. All client acquisition is stimulus and response, or in other words, psychological cause and effect. Then we have the outputs, which is clients. So the idea here is that when you take raw leads, qualified leads in your niche, and you expose them to the right conversion tools, you get clients. That is the first principle of client acquisition. Everyone thinks it's about having instantly and having all this fancy software and AI and stuff. It's not. It's data in your niche, correct conversion tools, combining both those things together, right? And the synthesis of the antithesis and the thesis is a client, and that's called Hegel's dialectic, but we're going to get into that another day. So feedback. So the feedback from this system is going to be metrics, okay? These are conversion rates that denote the effectiveness of parts of the system. So what is the true sort of feedback that comes from getting clients? Well, more than anything, it's going to be metrics. Now, the other thing that comes as a result of getting clients is a market understanding. So this is another form of feedback that you will receive, although it's much more intangible. It matters, but not as much as the metrics that you get as a result of signing clients, okay? And then the environment in this instance is the market, okay? So the market is basically the environment. These are the external conditions by which the system's operating in. So if you build a cold email system, whether you like it or not, that cold email system operates in the market, and the market can be everything from your competition to the niche, to the saturation, to the offers, all the way down to the internet service providers and the rules of email deliverability, et cetera, et cetera. Account bans, all of that shenanigans we have to bear in mind, because systems don't operate in a silo or a vacuum. They operate inside of an entity, and that entity is the environment, and that environment has probably more of an influence on the system and the performance of the system than you might think. But anyway, so this is the overarching macro system structure of client acquisition. We take leads, we put them through, or we expose them to a collection of conversion tools that are outlined in a linear fashion. So we start with like the very first conversion tool all the way to the close, then we get clients, and throughout that process, we're going to receive metrics, okay? Here's the thing. There are 6 stages that someone has to go through for a complete stranger to become a client. So we've got the macro system of leads to clients, right? The input is leads, the output is clients, but we have microsystems. So there are 6 stages of client acquisition that you need to be aware of, and basically what this means is there's 6 stages of conversion. So to go from stranger to client, there's 6 steps they got to go through, okay? Step number 1 is you need a system, right, with a set of processes or conversion tools, right, to get attention from latent conditions, okay? So this is the first thing you have to do. Like, people try and answer the question of like, how can I get clients? But that's way too big of a problem to solve if you don't even know how to get their attention in the first place. If we try and solve the problem of client acquisition, instead of trying to win the war, we're just trying to win 6 little battles. And through winning the 6 little battles, we win the war. So we have to focus on the micro, not the macro. It's a lot easier. And I'll explain what latent conditions are in just a second. System number 2 is you need a system with a set of processes to get interest from attention. And then we need a system with a set of processes to get appointments from interest. Then we need a system with a set of processes to get shows from appointments. Then we need a system with a set of processes to get primed prospects from shows. And then we need a system with a set of processes to get closed deals from primed prospects. So if you're wondering, you probably know what attention, interest, and appointments and shows are. Latent conditions are basically the psychological and situational conditions of someone's life in your market, okay? So for example, for you, let's say you run an agency, one of your latent conditions in your mind, in your unconscious mind, is that you don't want a 9 to 5, right? That's just an example of one latent condition you have. I can then use that latent condition as a marketer or someone trying to sell to you to get you to buy from me. Because I can say, hey, if you buy my product, you're never going to have to work a 9 to 5 again. And that's what marketing is all about, and building offers and building systems and everything around client acquisition is knowing what people are and using that to basically get them to buy from you. Sounds a bit Machiavellian, but that's what a latent condition is. Another example of a latent condition for a gym owner, primary example of this, because I used to work in the gym niche, is they feel overworked and underpaid, and they don't get the recognition they deserve from their members and their team. So you can use that. You can use the frustration, et cetera, okay? So a primed prospect is a prospect on a sales call that have been primed by the right questions, okay? So we're going from latent conditions, which is basically like nothing. This is before the Big Bang. This is just random atoms like flying around, and we need to get attention. So we're going from just normal people in your niche with a specific set of problems and psychological situational conditions, and we're going to flash something to them, hopefully nothing dirty. We're going to flash something in front of them that gets their attention, okay? Once we've got that attention, we need to convert it from attention to interest. So their eyeballs are on our stimulus. That sounds weird, but their eyeballs are on our stimulus, and now we need to convert that attention into genuine, real interest. And we can define interest, by the way, as just curiosity, the want to learn more. Once we've got their interest and they're curious as to, wanting to learn more, then we need to learn how we can turn that into an appointment. And then once we've got the appointment on the calendar, right, which is where most people fall short, by the way, is getting the appointments. Once we've done that, then we need to know how to get them to show up for the appointment, because if they don't show up, there's no point in booking it. And then once they've showed up, we need to know how to prime them with the right questions, introducing pain on the sales call, introducing emotion, introducing incentive, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, once they are primed and ripe and ready to be closed, we need a system or a process to actually close them, okay? And so people think that client acquisition is this woo-wah, like hippie, like, oh my God, if it happens sort of thing. It really isn't. It's cause and effect. It's just exposing the right people to the right set of stimuli over a linear chain for a period of time, and you make money. And that's how I booked 1,400 appointments in the last month, right? I know what stimulus works in my market, and I have 6 systems that convert people through these stages. So for someone to go from stranger to client, there are 6 steps of conversion, as we discussed. If you want client acquisition to be predictable, then you've got to build a predictable system for each step. So if you don't, like if you have 5 of these systems, but you're missing 1, client acquisition will not be predictable and reliable and consistent for you, okay? If you want that just on, like that constant onslaught of appointments, that constant steady march and steady flow of people coming in, you might not even need 1,400. Maybe your goal isn't 8 figures. Maybe you just want to make 10 grand a month, right? Maybe you just need 1 appointment a day. Well, whether you want 1 appointment a day or 100 appointments a day, you need to have all 6 of these systems, because you can have them all, but if you don't have a system for getting shows, what's the point of booking appointments? If you don't have a system for closing deals, you get the point. So here's a visualizer. So let's open this one up a second here. Okay, so here's a way to visualize these 6 subsystems essentially. Okay, so we've got the overarching structure here of going from stranger or human to client, and then receiving feedback in the form of conversion rates, right? And then we obviously have the triangle, which represents the overarching process of conversion. But really, if we dig into this and we actually take a look what's going on here, inside of this one process, we've got 6 systems, okay? So we sort of got like this, Russian doll effect, or is it Chinese doll? I think it's Russian doll. Someone correct me in the comments. But you see the point. We're going from latent conditions to attention, attention to interest, interest to appointment, appointment to show, show to prime prospect, and then we get the closed deal, okay? So that's how it works. That's how you need to see it. So now let's talk about something that sounds boring, but is probably the most important thing you can understand to reliably generating appointments. So metrics. So for every stage of conversion in the macro client acquisition system, there are conversion rates, okay? So we've got these 6 systems. By now you should know we've got 6, right? Because I've said it probably about 10 times, and you're probably like, Charlie, please just move on. There is a conversion rate that comes as a result of each system, okay? And the quality of those conversion rates determine the quality of the overall system, okay? So conversion rates measure the effectiveness of the conversion tools used to drive people through your client acquisition process. So if you remember, what is a conversion tool? It's a stimulus, effectively. It's the copy you use, it's the subject line, it is the loom you use, it's the cold call script you use, it's the ad you use, it's the creative you use. Any form of tangible marketing stimulus that you can be exposed to an individual in your market to get a client is a conversion tool, okay? Now, the better your conversion tools, or in other words, the more accurately they resonate with or prey upon, for lack of better words, the latent conditions of your market, the better your conversion rate will be. It is as simple as that. There is a direct relationship between the effectiveness of the conversion tools and the conversion rate. Conversion rates are calculated by dividing the output volume by the input volume and then multiplying by 100, okay? So it's a very simple method of figuring out what your conversion rate is you just go output, divide by input, times 100, okay? Examples. So let's say that you get 30 shows, 30 sales calls that show up, and from that you get 7 clients. So if we wanted to calculate the conversion rate of this stage of the system, which obviously is going to be, I believe, well, it's going to denote really system 4 to 6, right? The conversion rate there is 23%. Because we take the 7 clients, we divide them by the 30 shows, we times them by 100, and we get 23%, which is our sales conversion rate. Another example is 2,491 cold calls. And let's say that generates you 843 pitches. So when you're making cold calls, right, your first objective isn't to get appointments. Your first objective is to actually just pitch the decision maker, because that basically denotes the effectiveness of the system of getting the attention from the latent conditions and getting the interest from the attention, okay? We need to get clients, there's a few things we have to go through first, okay? But let's say that happens, you make 2,500 whatever cold calls, you book 843 appointments. We're going to do 843 divided by 2,491 times it by 100, which means we have an overall conversion rate of 33.8% from dial to pitch. So let's say that you, another example, you get 177 cold email positive replies, and from that you book 16 appointments. Well, the conversion rate of that would be 9%, okay? Simple. You must track key conversion rates when running client acquisition systems. I've helped near enough, like 1,100 or 1,200 agencies, coaches and consultants with client acquisition inside of EasyGrow. This is our program, for those of you that don't know. And if someone has a problem with their outbound systems, right, and they're like, oh, my cold emails aren't working, or my cold calling isn't working, usually it's a bit more dramatic than that, but you get the point. The very first thing I ask them is, what's the data? What are your conversion rates? And if they don't know, then I'm like, well, you need to go and find out, because I can't help you without the conversion rates. Trying to build a client acquisition system, specifically an outbound or even a paid client acquisition system, like an ads one, without knowing your conversion rates and tracking your metrics is like driving a car blind. That's probably the closest and most accurate example I can give you. It's dangerous, it's stupid, and you're going to crash and burn and probably die in the process. So we don't want that, okay? So you must also track the overarching appointment booking rate metric, right? For example, if you send 100 cold emails and get 2 appointments, you have an overall appointment booking rate of 2%. So really, like, when we're building systems for appointment booking, because I'm talking about getting clients, right? But if you're building a cold email system, cold call system, cold DM system, ad system, the main thing you're looking at, the North Star, the Polaris Star, the big kahuna, so to speak, of metrics, I hope that's not a bad word, I don't think it is. The big kahuna, for lack of better words, is appointment booking rate. So that's what we need to keep in mind. So only idiots build client acquisition systems without tracking their metrics. I'm assuming you're not an idiot. So don't try to build client acquisition systems without tracking your metrics. Maybe you've done it in the past, that's fine. You didn't know, now you know. Don't do it. Metrics are the most important thing to the function of a system when it comes to client acquisition. Build a tracker, for crying out loud. So we've got 7 systems in Easy Grow for outbound, like appointment booking. And I thought I could just share this tracker with you because I want to give you an example. Like, you might be like, well, how do I track my metrics? What does that look like? Like, what does that entail? I hear your questions, so let's just take a look at this one. All right, so you can see this here. This is an example of a metric tracking spreadsheet that we have for one system. You want to lay it out by the month down here, and then pretty simple. You can just have a look at this, the resources in the description. I'm not going to ask you for your email or your social security number or anything. It's free for you to use. But you can see, you're going to set out the dates, and every day you're going to log specific metrics, right, that you can that come as a result of using the system. And then what will happen is you will calculate your conversion rates, or the spreadsheet should automatically calculate the conversion rates for you, and you can use this as inspiration. All right. So the way this works when building a tracking system is you want to basically find like every step that you can track, you're going to track, if that makes sense. So if you're making cold calls, the first thing you're going to track is dials. The next thing you're then going to track is how many people actually pick up. And then what you're going to track is how many times you actually get through the decision maker. Then you're going to track how many times you actually pitch the decision maker. Then you're going to track how many times you actually get the decision maker to book an appointment. Instead of just tracking like cold call, appointment book, you've got to track all 5 or 4. I think there's 5 individual variables, because when you have those 5 things, you can start to identify bottlenecks, etc., etc. So to further our understanding of metrics, we need to understand something called key performance indicators, because now you're going to be asking like, well, Charlie, okay, I'll track my metrics, but how do I know which metrics are good? Like, how do I know what's good, what's bad? Well, we use something called KPIs to determine this, okay? So KPI stands for key performance indicator, okay? This is a metric we set as a goal or a standard to denote the health of a system, okay? So think of it like this, right? If you're still struggling to gauge KPIs, or maybe you do understand them, but you're still a bit sure on how to like use them, well, doctors have metrics they deem healthy for the human body, okay? So the human body has key performance indicators, essentially, right? Things that keep you alive. So for example, like a healthy heart rate or a KPI for your heart rate is anywhere between 60 to 80. Now mine's actually about 55 when I'm sleeping. My little Oura ring tells me that. But you get the point, right? I'm just going to flex my heart rate on you, which is definitely not normal or friendly. But anyway, you get the point. Healthy BMI for an adult is between 18.5 and 24.9. Don't ask me to explain this. I Googled it, but you get the point, right? Healthy blood pressure is 90 over 60 or 120 over 80, like between those 2 ranges. Like, you need to treat your systems like a doctor treats his patient or her patient or their patient, I don't care, right? If you're sick, the first thing your doctor will do is get data on your key health metrics like the above, and from this data, they will basically make observations and they'll make a diagnosis and prescribe a solution. Prescription without diagnosis is malpractice in the medical field, and the same thing is true with client acquisition. So if you're building like a system to book appointments or close deals, you've got to treat it like a doctor, right? You've got to be able to accurately diagnose what the problem is at any point, at any moment, and you do that using data. Because if you walked into your doctor's surgery, they just sat you down, asked you one question and prescribed you a drug, you'd be like, what the hell? But if they if they do blood tests, right, and they're looking for like, I don't know, bloody like lipid count or hormone counts or something. And then if they also go ahead and take your blood pressure and then take your heart rate, and then like they tee that up with everything that you say and that you're feeling, and then they can actually like figure out what the problem is. But if you don't have that data, like then you're kind of screwed, right? Why do they do this? Well, they do it because the human body functions as a system, and that's a story for another day, but I could make a whole video on that. But anyway, so just like we have KPIs that denote the healthy function of a body, we have KPIs that denote the healthy function of a system. When building a system, one of the first things you have to do is to find what your key performance indicators are, what's achievable, what's optimal, and what's the lowest standard you're willing to accept. So it's really important you think this through. Like, what do you actually want out of this system? Because if you define the goal or the key performance indicator, you can start to optimize and you can start to make decisions and take actions to move towards that goal or that objective. But if you don't have a goal, or if you don't have any idea as to what you want, you're just completely blind and you're just going to end up being that kid that is swinging for the piñata at 10 years old that doesn't hit anything and just looks like an idiot in front of all of his friends. Definitely wasn't me when I was 10. Anyway, right. So once you know this number, as a conversion rate, by the way, because key performance indicators in the client acquisition realm typically do represent themselves in percentage conversion rates. And remember, output divided by input times 100, right? Once you've done this, you can start to optimize and shuffle the variables of your conversion tools to achieve it. Now the plot thickens, you see. Conversion tools have variables. And this is about to get really weird. I'm going to explain why. If you don't get this, you're never going to be able to reliably book appointments. So stick around and just bear with me for a second and, bear witness to my incredible YouTube retention strategy right there, but you get the point. So different conversion tools impact different conversion rates. So remember, a conversion tool is a stimulus, right? That we're flashing in front of someone. So conversion tools can be attributed to conversion rates and their effectiveness is measured accordingly. So I'm hoping I'm building you up here from a first principles perspective. I'm hoping I'm rewiring and reshaping your paradigm around how client acquisition is done, all right? We have leads and we have clients and we have processes throughout that, right, to convert them. There's 6 processes. Each process uses a set of conversion tools. How do we measure those tools and how do we find the right ones? Well, we set a KPI and we move towards it. So for example, this is the Terminator Loom system, one of the cold email systems we have in EasyGrow. There 7 of them, but this is one. There's different metrics we track and different conversion rates that we think are within KPI. So we have the Loom view rate, which is between 15 and 25%. So when we're building the Terminator Loom system for clients and when we're helping them do that, we're looking for a minimum of a 15% Loom view rate, which means that if you send 100 cold emails with a Loom attached, you want at least 15 people to watch that Loom. That's the minimum we'll accept, and that's the key performance indicator. So that when we're building all of our conversion tools that can be attributed directly to Loom view rate, we're building them with a 15% KPI in mind. It's where it gets interesting. So the conversion tools that we would use to get a 15% Loom view rate, a subject line, body copy, offer, the thumbnail of the Loom, etc. So this is the thing, everyone thinks that if they just get the right piece of email copy, that their entire business will be fixed. But it doesn't work like that, because the body copy of your email in your Loom, if you're sending Looms, the body copy is one variable of 4 or 5 that will determine the effectiveness of your Loom view rate, just that single isolated metric. Email copy doesn't get your clients, right? You have to build so many variables and systems, and you've got to imagine that you're building 6 different little systems to get the whole thing to work. You have to think like this, okay? So then we've got the positive reply rate, which is the KPI minimum of 3 to 5%. And the tools that we use, or the conversion tools, or the stimulus that we use to determine the positive reply rate are the Loom script, the call to action, and the delivery of the Loom itself. Okay? Because trust me, if you record a Loom for someone and you sound like this, and you sound like, I really don't want to be here, and I just want to, they're not going to reply. Okay? So this would be like if we sent 100 emails and got 3 people replying, we would be in KPI. Okay? Appointment booking rate. So this is important. We're looking for a 1.5% minimum. And really the main variables that can be attributed to appointment booking rate are the reply framework, the follow-up sequence, the Calendly event, all that shenanigans. Now, here's the thing. When you build client acquisition systems, you're going to start to stack metrics on top of each other, right? And so the appointment booking rate is going to be also influenced by the body copy, by the subject line, by the offer, by the thumbnails. So when you're looking at like the metric at the very top, which is usually appointment booking rate for these appointment booking systems, you've got to bear in mind that every variable below it is influencing it, right? But what we want to be able to do is break down, really 2, 3, or 4 conversion rates and then attribute each conversion tool to them so that we can build it properly. Because if all you're looking at is the appointment booking rate, and there's actually like 10 to 15 different conversion tools that are all contributing to that, we don't know what's what. We don't know how to accurately depict and understand what's influencing what and what we need to change and stuff like that. But by breaking it down into sub-metrics, it's way easier, because instead of just trying to fix the appointment booking rate, you're just trying to fix the Loom view rate. And usually if you fix that, you fix the other thing. Does that make sense? I'm hoping it does. We also track the view to positive reply rate and the positive reply to appointment booking rate, but this is a little bit more advanced than I wanted to go into in this video, so I'm not going to get into these these what we would call sub-metrics, okay? Sub-conversion tools. So Keystone Metrics. So every system has a Keystone metric, right? This is the metric that measures the overall performance of the entire system. For example, if you're looking at the human body, the Keystone metric is probably going to be your resting heart rate, right? Depends obviously on what you're optimizing for. But if you ask yourself, like, what is the easiest way to determine whether or not someone is healthy? Maybe it's resting heart rate. If I'm sure there's plenty of doctors that are just slapping their faces right now in disbelief, like, Charlie, you're an idiot. But you get the point, right? For appointment booking systems, it's appointment booking rate. For sales systems, it's the overall sales conversion rate. Here's the thing. If the overall Keystone metric, which we would call the North Star or the Polaris Star metric, is in KPI, you need never ever to make any changes to metrics downstream of it. Everyone gets, like, in advertising and in cold emails and all this stuff, everyone gets very obsessed with the early data. So they're like, everyone's obsessed with getting like $1 clicks, or everyone's obsessed with getting like emails opened and stuff like that. And everyone's like, oh, I managed to pitch like 5 people today. But it doesn't matter, right? So let me break your paradigm for a second. So let's say that you're running ads, right, to get clients. And let's say your product costs $5,000. If I came to you and I said, I'm running these ads to get clients, it's currently costing me $1,000 to get a click. You'd be like, well, that's a broken system. There's no way you can like reliably profit off of ads if you're getting $1,000 per click. But then if I told you and contextualize it that every single person that clicks purchases, and I have a 100% conversion rate through every single system beyond the click, then it would make sense. So don't isolate and focus on earlier metrics when you should be isolated and focused on later metrics. Does that make sense? So for example, let's say that, like, if I was doing cold email and I said my email open rate is 1%. If I said that to someone, they'd be like, well, that's a broken system. You need to improve that. But if every person who opened the email went on to buy from me, then the system would be profitable. Because for every 100 clients, for every 100 emails I sent, I'd get a client. So never ever just zoom in and focus on the first thing. You have to look at this holistically, and you have to go to the very end and then reverse engineer and diagnose everything back to the start, okay? And that's why we have these Keystone metrics, because they keep us, accountable to basically not being irrational and not being stupid. So I kind of gave an example there, right? But let's do another example, right? So let's say that you're sending looms via cold email, or DMs or whatever, but you only have a loom view rate of 5%. But if every person who views your loom books a call, the appointment booking rate is 5%. So most people would be idiotic in this instance and try to increase loom view rate to increase ABR, but the Keystone metrics and KPIs says there's no need, right? If you ever want to get more from a system that's already working, don't change anything, just increase the volume of the inputs, and this is called scale. This is a very, very, very important lesson in business acumen and scale and critical thinking, right? If you have a system that's working, that's functioning in KPI, do not try to improve it, just try to scale it. This is so important. If you let's say that you have a cold email system with a 2% appointment booking rate, right? And for every 100 emails you send, you book 2 appointments. Newsflash, you don't need to do anything except from put more volume through it. Because if you've got a set of conversion tools and a set of systems that convert it 2%, then all you need to do is increase volume. Because if you send 100 emails a day, you book 2 appointments a day. But if you send 300 appointments a day, you book 6 appointments a day. But what most people do is they're really stupid, and they change things around to try and optimize and improve. But that's really dumb, because we're not looking for growth in systems, we're looking for predictability. We're not looking to try and optimize everything to get to 10%. All we're trying to do is establish some proof of concept that we can then add volume to. And if you're wondering how to scale, if you're wondering what scale is, it's just applying volume to a specific system. Once again, I could make another 2-hour video on that topic alone, but how to scale. But that's just something you need to bear in mind, all right? Doesn't matter if your loom view rate's 5%, but your appointment booking rate is 5%. Please don't go and try and change anything or think like, oh yeah, I'm just going to do this. Just send more emails. Simple as that, okay? So now let's actually get into the nuts and bolts of this, because that's the theory sort of covered, right? That's the, systems thinking for client acquisition 101. Trust me, there is a lot more to it than that, but for the sake of your sanity and for the sake of my sanity, we're just going to focus on the foundations for now. So that's the theory. So now it's time for the big question. How do you make or build the conversion tools that actually achieve the KPIs and convert people? So the question you're now asking is, okay, I understand, Charlie, I gotta get the metrics and everything. Tell me something useful, please, right? We need to understand this. So conversion tools have typically anywhere between 3 to 4 key variables, and you need to start thinking of these like DNA. Right? So I want you to think that a conversion tool has a genotype. It has DNA. It has a set of variables that basically make it up. And a key variable is a component of a conversion tool that has a big impact on its effectiveness. So, for example, let's just take a Loom video, right? As that's a part, it's a conversion tool. But inside of that Loom video, we've got keystone variables. For example, the delivery, the call to action, the script itself, the introduction, the offer. All of these things are going to influence it. And so what we need to start understanding is that we have the system here, and then we have the conversion tools here, and then we have the variables here. And so we have this branch node model. So for example, let's take a look here. So one conversion tool is a standard cold email. All the key variables here are the subject line, the body copy, the call to action. If you're doing a Loom cold email, then the key variables are body copy, Loom script, Loom delivery. Maybe subject line as well if you're feeling a bit fancy. Cold DM, opener, pitch, platform, delivery, if voice note or video. Cold call process, opener, pitch, delivery. Nurturing process, confirmation email, there's be a few more. Or a sales script, right? The key variables to a sales script are going to be the questions that you ask, the way you pitch, the answers, the rebuttals, your tone of voice. Now, certain variable combinations will be suited to a sent conversion in your market. And what that basically means is that all we're looking to do here is shuffle up the right variables and find the right combination. So I want you to imagine for a second that, every time you're building a conversion tool, it's like you've got a padlock. And what you're trying to do is you're shuffling through the four numbers to try and pop the lock. And there's a lot of different combinations inside of that lock that will open it. It's not just one. There could be thousands. If you've got a padlock with four numbers on it, I think there's like 16,000 potential combinations. So all you're doing is just going through, and you're like, I'll go 1, 7, 3, 9. Nope, didn't work. Okay, I'll change the 9 to an 8. Oh, it worked. Right? And that's what you're trying to do, is just shuffle variables to find something that assents to conversion. Okay? An assent is basically means like it's going to happen. So what this means is that all that stands between you and a predictable client acquisition system is simply finding and combining the right variables. We're finding and combining the right variables for system number 1, system number 2, system number 3, system number 4, system number 5, and system number 6. It's not just about the sales script. It's not just about the body copy. It's not just about the subject line. These are small components or key variables to conversion tools that influence conversion rates, which influence the overall system. So where it's going to get a little bit weird, right? It's like natural selection. And I put duh here, but now I realize how painfully and ironically, it's not even funny, so I probably shouldn't have done that. But anyway, right. So it's literally natural selection. So biology lesson 101, natural selection is the phenomenon through which organisms with traits better adapted to their environment have a greater chance of survival and therefore the reproduction of offspring. All right. So we all know the old Mr. Charles Darwin. He haunted us during our time as teenagers in biology class. But fortunately enough for you, I paid attention during that class. So now I can explain client acquisition to you. There's a parallel. It's very important you understand this. In nature, there is an environment, and the environment sets the conditions for which organisms survive. Organisms with a genotype or specific DNA that produce physical traits that favor survival will live. And organisms that have a genotype, DNA, that produce physical traits that don't favor survival will die. Simple enough. If you are a beetle living on brown bark and you are green, you're more likely to die than a beetle that is living on brown bark that is brown. The same is true with client acquisition systems. In business, there is a market. The market sets the conditions for which conversion tools convert. And conversion tools with a set of variables, hint, hint, this is DNA, right? Strands, all that shenanigans. Conversion tools with a set of variables that convert within KPI are effective. And conversion tools with a set of variables that don't convert within KPI are ineffective. So my entire paradigm for client acquisition comes down to natural selection. And I have spent an unholy amount of time studying Charles Darwin and his theory, and I've tried to boil it down into, 8 sentences, which I'm hoping has worked, okay? So the environment is the market. The organism is the conversion tool. You have to start looking at these stimuli or these tangible marketing assets as living, breathing organisms with DNA. And if that organism or if that living, breathing thing has DNA that favors its survival in the environment, then it will live and survive and flourish and it will convert. But if it doesn't, if the keystone variables that make it up, the combination, if it's not going to unlock the lock, they're going to die, right? Hoping this is making sense. Please tell me if it is in the comments. I appreciate it. Maybe it makes no sense to anyone, but I'm hoping it does. So DNA is a set of variables, right? So if we've got a Loom video right? The DNA of that loom video, which will determine its effectiveness and whether or not it has fitness in the environment, whether or not it can survive and convert, is going to be the delivery of the loom, the script of the loom, the call to action, the introduction, the offer, all of these things make it up. Then we have survival, which is conversion within KPI, and then we have death, which is conversion below KPI. We want to see conversion tools as organisms in an environment that are being tested to see if their genetic code or their variables are favorable to survival. Natural selection is the key. But how do we, my friends, mere humans, simulate natural selection? Okay, this is where it gets exciting. So I'm hoping that I've, in some way, shape or form, been able to reframe the way that you're seeing things here. I'm hoping that you understand now that in order for us to get clients, we have to go from stranger to, like from lead to client. There's 6 stages, and whether or not we're effective at each stage is determined by the conversion tools we use, and whether or not each conversion tool is effective is determined by the key variables inside of it. And really it's about combining the right ones. So how do we find what works? Okay, great, Charlie, thanks for explaining natural selection to me. Definitely didn't need to go back to the trauma from biology from when I was 12, but how does this help me? Well, let's actually get into it. So, the scientific method. I put some stars here because I thought it would be funny, but then I realized I'm like a 25-year-old man and I have no business using ironic emoji structures, but you know what? I don't really care. Right. So to build successful client acquisition systems, we effectively need to build what we would call a natural selection machine. Because natural selection and this process of selection is very good at finding the right variables for survival. So we want to be able to look at it, observe it, and try to duplicate it into our business so we can use its prowess and all of its power to find variables that work for us. So the closest thing we have as mere mortals to natural selection is the scientific method. And the scientific method is probably my single greatest tool for thought when it comes to building these things. So here's how it works. Step 1 is to formulate a hypothesis. Step 2 is to test that hypothesis. Step 3 is to receive feedback as a result of the test. And step 4 is to iterate the new hypothesis. The best marketers are not the best marketers, they are the best scientists. It's a very important lesson for you to learn if you're early on in your SMMA or your agency or your business or your consulting career. It's not about being persuasive, and it's not about, obviously that helps, right? But it's far more about being able to think rationally and run proper experiments and actually test things properly. The hypothesis is basically a combination of variables for a conversion tool. So if you were to ask me, Charlie, what's a hypothesis when it comes to client acquisition? Well, the hypothesis is the 4 digits on the lot code. So I'm going to test 2783 to see if that works, right? And if it doesn't, then you receive feedback and you iterate and you change. In this instance, the hypothesis is the set of key variables that make up the conversion tool. So for example, let's say your cold call script is going to be a conversion tool, or the cold call pitch, because the script, the opener and the pitch are different. So the script is the tool, and inside of that tool, we've got these key variables, which is going to be the way you open, the offer you give, and then the way you try and close people onto an appointment, right? Those are the 3 key variables, and by combining a set of 3 of them, you have a hypothesis. And then we have this term called feedback, and basically feedback, as we know at this point, are metrics, conversion rates. So the scientific method put a man on the moon, allegedly. Once again, I'm trying to use some ironic emojis to relate to my Gen Z friends, but kind of is probably not working. But it also invented Skittles. If it can do that, it can help you find winning conversion tools for your business. So pretty much everything that is great about being a human, like everything as a result of technology or science, has come as a result of the scientific method. Although ironically, penicillin was discovered by accident, like just complete accident. So we probably would have got there in the end. But the point here is that you can use the scientific method to do pretty much anything ever. And all the great things that have ever been done ever have come as a result of the scientific method. So step 1 is to formulate your hypothesis. So when we're building conversion tools, this is how we find the right ones. Okay, and we're doing this for each conversion tool, and we're attributing them through conversion rates. We're attributing them to different metrics, and then we're establishing KPIs, and then we're building up from the bottom. Okay, so the hypothesis is a collection of key variables. Think of this like a strand of DNA code. For example, right, we can have a Loom cold email hypothesis. You've got subject V1, body copy V1, Loom script V1, and Loom delivery V1. So version 1 of all of these key variables makes the first version of our hypothesis. And so what we're then going to do is step 2, which is to test the hypothesis, okay? To do this, you'd send 200 looms. Understand, the larger your sample size, the more validity your data has. So don't just go and send 20 looms, receive no responses, and then tell me that you haven't got a working loom system. You need to do hundreds of outreaches per variable, okay? Same with cold calls. This is so stupid and so irrational. Like, and I really get it. I understand where the behavior comes from because I used to do it, right? But you need to realize that if you make like 50 cold calls and don't book any appointments, that doesn't mean the script doesn't work, because numbers only present themselves in large enough data sets. And so you need to give the system enough data and enough numerical validity in order for that average to actually represent itself, okay? So don't just send 10 cold DMs and then assume it doesn't work. Send a couple of hundred. Gather data. You think a scientist, if they were going to like experiment with like some sort of like new heart surgery tool, if they're experimenting on monkeys or something, you think they just do like 3 monkeys and be like, oh yeah, it works? No, they do hundreds, right? Which is a pretty harrowing idea, but you get the point, right? They're not just going to do like 1 or 2 or 10 or 30 and just say it doesn't work. They're going to do hundreds because they take it seriously. So step 3 is to observe results, feedback. So after sending a couple of hundred looms in this instance and keeping an accurate log of the data, you should have established conversion rates. So now you actually have something to play with. You have data. You should have established KPIs for conversion rates prior to starting the experiment. And as we know, the conversion rates are attributed to different conversion tools. For example, you can see these ones here. So here's a short step or a short step-by-step SOP for step 3. So we're observing the results. At this point, we've created our hypothesis, which is basically putting together our key variables to create our conversion tool. We're now sending that conversion tool and putting that conversion tool in front of people in our niche, and we're going to see what happens. We're going to see how many people actually convert as a result of the tool we've used. What we're going to do is we're going to judge the end. So if the Keystone metric is in KPI, leave the system alone and increase volume. If not, you go to the metric that is below it, right? So we go from ABR to PRR. If the next metric below it is in KPI, then you need to make some changes to the conversion tools impacting the end metric. So if it's not in KPI, you need to move to the next metric and repeat step 2 until you've got to the core of the problem. So that's a real, once again, like short way of diagnosing this in easy growing. I've got this video called Iterative Darwinian Acquisition, which explains the scientific method, but it took me like 4 hours to explain it. And I thought that might be a little bit unfriendly for a YouTube audience, so I decided against explaining it in any more detail, but I need you to just grasp the foundations here. So for example, if we're reviewing the data and the ABRs and KPI, we don't touch anything, we just scale. But if we review the data and ABR is not in KPI, we look at PRR. If PRR is in KPI, then what we're going to start doing is isolating the conversion tools specific to ABR that we can improve. And if we look at PRR and PRR is not in KPI, then we're going to look at loom view rate. But if loom view rate's in KPI, right, and we're like, well, our loom view rate's like 28%, but our PRR is only like 0.3%, then what we need to do is we need to isolate the problem by looking at the conversion tools that directly impact PRR. Hoping this is starting to make sense. You're probably going to have to watch this video 3, 4, 5 times. Okay, it might be probably in fact is the most important video you will ever watch on client acquisition, because if you can't think, you can't act properly. Okay, the quality of your actions and decisions are upstream of your paradigm and the way that you perceive the world. And if you're dealing with client acquisition, you need to deal with it in this way, because otherwise you're going to get lost. So let's say after 200 looms, you have an ABR of 0.9%, a PRR of 1.7%, and an LVR of 9%. Well, since ABR, which is the Keystone metric, is out of KPI, you're not going to make any changes to the system at this level. Instead, look at PRR. Well, PRR is still out of KPI, so no changes to that. So the culprit is loom view rate. So here, if we got the loom view rate to KPI, let's say we got it to 18%, then in theory, we would double our ABR and PRR, and we'd be able to scale. So step 4 is to iterate the hypothesis. And I cannot stress enough, just before we go on, if you don't understand the points I'm trying to make in this video, you need to rewatch this video as many times as you need to until it clicks. Because what should be happening right now is you should be going, I get it, or I see. If you're not making like weird, ineligible noises that denote your understanding or some sort of complete paradigm shift, this isn't going in, right? And I need it to go in. I need you to understand it. Otherwise, you're not going to get any results, okay? So please rewatch it over and over again until it really just ingrains into your brain, okay? Because I booked 1,400 appointments last month because of this. Step 4 is iterate hypothesis. So what we're going to do once we've looked at our data and once we've defined what the problem is, we're going to start to change the key variables. So revisit the key variables in your hypothesis and iterate one, ideally the one that has the most impact on the metric you're trying to improve. So we've got subject, body copy, loom script, loom delivery, and that was V1. But we know in the current environment that the hypothesis causes these metrics. So now we've established cause and effect. And if you run a test and it doesn't work, you shouldn't be upset. You should be celebrating, because now you know what doesn't work. You're one step closer to finding what does. So we know that if we run this hypothesis into that market with the same conditions, we will result in these metrics. It's a very strong power to have, understanding cause and effect. So in this instance, we'd look to edit the body copy, which will have the biggest impact on Loom view rate, okay? So what you do is you'd rewrite the body copy to try and improve it and do something that, you think is gonna work better. And then what we would do is we'd create our second version of our hypothesis, where we still use the same subject line, we still use the same Loom script, and we still use the same Loom delivery, but we just improve the body copy. Because remember, we're not making any changes to the Loom script or Loom delivery, right? We're not making any changes to the way we reply to people. We're not making any changes to the way we book the appointments, right? Because these metrics are actually within KPI if we scale the Loom view rate. So if we get the Loom view rate to 18%, ABR suddenly jumps to 1.8, and PRR suddenly jumps to 3.4. So we've defined the bottleneck or the problem as Loom view rate. And, if we ask ourselves which conversion tool is going to have the biggest impact on Loom view rate, it's the body copy. So we iterate where we have the most leverage, okay? So then we repeat steps 1 to 4, and it really is this simple. It's boring, it's slow, and it's not shiny at all, but it works. Newsflash, this is business, by the way. Boring, slow, and not shiny. But that's how businesses are built. If you're trying to build an agency or a coaching business or whatever, and you want to get to like multi-six figures, it ain't going to happen overnight. I know you've seen the testimonials and the results and all of these cases of people just doing these wacky things. They are the exception, not the rule. All right? We need to use like rational, scientific processes of achievement. And they take time and they're boring and they're really not fun. And my business, Imperium Acquisition, we've gone from $0 completely brand new to about $1 million a month in near enough 2 years. That's unprecedented growth, right, in this space. But the only reason I was able to do that is because I was already sat on 5 years of experience of using this model and this method. So I already knew how to think. I already had the right belief systems, the right decision-making frameworks. My paradigm was not flawed. I knew exactly what I had to do. And I stepped into a market and into a vehicle that allowed me to increase volume and scale, and thus I did, right? So that's the point. So with time and patience, you will find the right answer. It might take weeks, it might take months, it could even take years. But the length of time it takes for this scientific method to work depends on the initial conditions of the experiment. So at the very conception, I shouldn't use the word conception, it's a bit dodgy in it, but at the very genesis, for lack of better words, of your experiment, how close are you to already having the keystone variables that work? And I know this is going to sound like sort of like a backhanded pitch, but this is why I'm not saying you have to buy EasyGrow, which is my program, but this is why you want to try and look to find variables that already have been proven to work. Because if you have to because this is why I had to do this from scratch. I spent 7 years building, I've done literally hundreds, if not thousands of experiments for client acquisition to find variables that work. And so now EasyGrow is a product of literally 7 or 8 years of iteration for me, right? So I can just say to someone, hey, this cold email copy, this cold DM, this cold call script, this ad, this creative, and I know it works because I've literally spent the last 8 years testing to find the most optimal ones, right? So that's the big advantage you get by buying a program. It doesn't have to be EasyGrow. Maybe you don't like me. Maybe you don't want to buy my thing. I don't care, right? I truly do not care. But this is the point. Like, you want to try and get some sort of advantage where you can at the initial conditions. Because if we observe the butterfly effect, or what is actually a better word for it that explains it better is the law of sensitive dependence on initial conditions. It determines that, the way we set something at the very beginning, if we apply time and scale to it, achieves completely asymmetric results, okay? Ceteris Paribus is basically, I just said that as if like everyone knows what it is. Nobody knows what Ceteris Paribus is, right? This basically means with all conditions remaining the same except one, okay? So what you observe here is when we're iterating, we're keeping everything identical except from one thing. What we're looking to do with the scientific method is establish cause and effect relationships, right? And we're looking to establish these relationships between conversion tool variables and the market taking action to become a client. So to successfully attribute cause and effect, we must know exactly what is causing the effect, right? Kind of goes without saying. When you're iterating variables and trying to shuffle these variables inside of your conversion tools to find what works, you need to keep everything the same except one variable. If with hypothesis version 2 that we looked at up here, right? If you run that hypothesis, but you also run a new offer, and you also use a new lead sourcer, so you're sourcing different leads, but the results of the test come out worse and you regress away from KPI, You do not know what caused the drop in results. Was it the copy? Was it the offer? Was it the new leads, or a combination of all three? This is why it requires patience, it requires time, it requires effort, it requires boredom. People in this space are so impatient and so erratic. They'll watch like a YouTube video. They'll be running, like, you're going to do this, right? You're going to take this video and you're going to start an experiment. And then what's going to happen is you're going to scroll through Facebook or some, degenerate platform that you shouldn't be on anyway. You're going to scroll through something and you're going to find like a new shiny object. Someone's going to say, I started doing this in my emails and my replies doubled, right? And what you're going to do is you're going to look at that and you're going to immediately introduce that into your system whilst you're running an experiment. And then what's going to happen is the experiment you're running is going to go one of two ways. It's either going to improve or not improve, right? And probably it's not going to improve, because if you iterate more than one thing, it usually goes wrong. But then if it doesn't improve, you don't know if it was the experiment, the variable you're testing, or if it was this random thing you found on Facebook. Do you really think that a scientist, a qualified PhD scientist, if they were running an experiment, let's say they were trying to grow a specific type of bacteria, if they were running that experiment, and then suddenly they're on TikTok one day, and then they find another scientist say, oh, I use this, and this worked. And then they run to their Petri dish and then put that in, and then be like, oh, they wouldn't. They understand the premise that you have to have ceteris paribus. It's Latin for all conditions remaining the same except one. It is so important you have this, and you can think like this, and you keep your impulses at bay, and you do not let your erratic, impatient, emotional state interfere with the experiment. Do not let that happen. Scientists understand you must keep all conditions and variables within your control. And we call these having fixed variables, okay? During an experiment, you must never, ever have more than one thing you're trying to change at once, okay? Never iterate more than one variable at a time. Be patient, methodical, complete every test before experimenting with a new hypothesis, okay? And so this is how, the scientific method works. We formulate the hypothesis, we test the hypothesis, we observe the results, we iterate the hypothesis, and that's how it works. So that's basically my paradigm for client acquisition. Trust me, it goes a lot deeper than this. There are videos inside of EasyGrow that, I kid you not, are 3 to 4 hours long, just explaining natural selection and the intricacies of it and how it works. So if you need help getting more clients, there's a link in the description you can click. It's a video of me trying to sell you something, hands in the air, it's a pitch. I truly do not care if you click it or not, I really don't mind. All that matters to me is that you get value from this video, you use it, and you one step closer towards your goal. If I've helped you do that with this video, that's all that I really care about. But if you want to buy my thing, it wouldn't hurt, But anyway, listen, jokes aside, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.